Thank you everybody for joining us for tonight's very special edition of our production classroom Q&As. Tonight, we're so happy to have with us the design team for Something Grim. That would be John Slauson, Micheal Heath Waid, Nicole Iannaccone, and Kyle Jensen. And I'm Amy Lacey. I'll be your moderator this evening, and we're just so happy to have everybody here. Friends, if we could start by going out around the room and talking a little bit about what your role is in the show and how you interface with all the activity here. And I will just start with the person I see first on my screen, and Kyle Jensen, that would be you.
All right. My name is Kyle Jensen, and I, for Something Grim, am the sound designer. So I was in charge of recording all of the video footage, all the audio for the video footage, as well as putting together all the sound effects and the soundscapes that you hear in the experience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kyle. Nicole, I see you next. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do with the show and here at Dallas Theater Center?
Sure. I am the lighting designer. So all of the fun lights that do crazy things and look neat and show you stuff, I made that happen along with my awesome crew who had a, huge hand in helping me do so.
Wonderful. And it's beautifully lit too. I have some really lovely photos of lights outside the Wyly, unlike anything I've ever seen there. So thank you so much for that.
Awesome. I might need to look at those.
I'll be happy to share them with you. Well, Micheal Heath Waid, can you tell us a little bit about what your part in all of this magic is?
Sure. For Grimm, I am the costume designer. It was a bit of a strange situation just because there are no live actors in the show. So when you see the show in projection, you'll see where I came in. But for DTC, I'm the costume director, which puts me in lead charge of the costume shop, the hair and makeup department, and the wardrobe department.
There's a whole lot of fun going on there. I've had some really great memories made in that costume shop, thanks to you and your friends. So thank you so much for that. And John Slauson, please jump in and tell us all about your role.
Normally I'm the head of props for the Dallas Theater Center. And for this season, I'm sort of the resident set designer / video content designer. So for Grimm, that is what I have been doing. The difficult sort of part to that is we're not doing this in a theater. So there is nothing, there's nothing that we can put a finger on and say that's scenery, and but there's a ton of scenery in this show. The thing for me about this show is that while I've done a little video or a little content design before, I've done about this much video editing, and I learned a new skill doing this show. I did a lot of video editing for this show, and so it was a lot of fun, and I have a new thing in my bag of tricks.
That's outstanding. I love that. There's, one of the great things about Dallas Theater Center is it is a place where you can continually grow. There is no end to the growth that is possible and that happens every day there. So, well, thank you all. And I'm going to open the floor to let you guys kind of organically talk us through the how you developed this show, which is a completely original work based on and inspired by the Grimm's fairy tales. If you could talk about what your process was, how did you turn that into this beautiful performance that we are sharing with Dallas audiences?
Well, for me, this process was very unusual. It was conceived by the actors collectively, in terms of dialogue. They were putting this together during their rehearsal process. So when we began talking about the show, we didn't have a script to work from like we might normally have, which made our decision making come a lot later than we might have usually have preferred it to happen. So it just the timing of it all was was off, and it took a while to really gain our footing on this production. I know for costumes, for us, it was a little strange just because not having any live actors during the performance, they're all pre-recorded. Um, all of our work was done very early in the process while we're filming. Once we'd finished filming, we were done and kind of left. We're like, okay, everybody else is super busy, and I feel like I
It
should
was
be really busy.
so weird not to have costume folks around during tech. I kept missing you guys all the time. I was like, where's my wardrobe? And there are no friends here.
I kept thinking, should I go to tech? Should I go to tech? I mean, I don't have anything to do at tech because there are no actors there to dress, but I feel like I should go. That's how I felt the entire time.
And you
Totally
mentioning,
understand.
yeah, you mentioning the, the process being sort of backwards from normal. Like we started working and then they gave us a script in like a couple of weeks in. So for me, there was saying, there's, for instance, there is a graveyard in the show, and we knew there was going to be a graveyard, but we didn't know whose tombstones they were. So we literally made gravestones that said things like grandmother, grandfather, daughter, sister, cook, because that was generic enough that we could fit it in the story. And it turned out to actually, what they wrote turned out to work beautifully for those gravestones. But literally it was done that way because we didn't have a script. We just knew there was a grave.
Technically, in my light plot, all the graves have like silly names for them, like Lester Moore, here's lies Lester Moore, no less, no more. Like dumb jokes like that, because I had no idea who the graves were for when we did the lights originally.
Yeah. So Michael, I know when we did the video stuff, like you had designed some of this again before there was a script. So we got into video and it was like, oh, is this going to work? What are we doing?
Well, and a lot of it, there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of changes about who we needed to see in the projections. Because as you know, the projections are only a part of the story. So we trying to figure out who we actually saw in the projection. There was a lot of variation and changing, so it was back and forth. I don't know who, that it became more confusion than I really like it to be. So that was a bit of a struggle bus on this show. And also not being, I make theater, I don't make films. And so also trying to learn what works on a camera, because color looks different on a camera, but also small prints on fabric, like little bitty stripes or little checks, they do this weird hazy confusing thing on a camera, so you have to avoid things like that. But I feel like, sorry, John, I feel like
go ahead.
Part of that struggle is, or part of this particular struggle with that is that I also had no money to work with, so I couldn't buy anything. So everything came out of our stock. Well, we already had. So most of it was just this fits you and it kind of works with this character, so here we go.
Yeah, I learned.
It helps that most of our actors look fabulous in like everything.
In everything,
yeah. I mean, there's that.
I learned because I've shot some green screen stuff before, but this was sort of intensive green screen, and I learned a lot of what not to do. So like there's obvious things, but one of the things that didn't cross my mind is that we have a king who's in a robe that's got shiny, like crystal, diamondy, sparkly things on parts of it. Those picked up the green screen, which means when I edited the king in the video, he had holes going through him.
Oh my God. That's
interesting.
Which never crossed my mind that would be
Yeah.
that would be a thing.
But I guess
so-
they're picking up the green light and the reflectivity. Like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read a bunch about it beforehand. Like, they say if you're doing a dinner scene, don't use shiny silverware or things like that. So I avoided some of the traps, but some of the things were just a learning experience. And I was like, okay, I know now that you can't have gold jewelry if you're shooting on a green screen because it picks up the green and then your watch goes away.
That actually worked in one particular scene to your advantage, didn't it?
Probably. Remind me.
Spoiler alert: Death of the King with the
Oh.
gold headband.
Yeah.
I mean, it's grim fairy tales. Everybody dies.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I wouldn't say to the advantage, but no one is going to notice the screw up. The king's crown is gold and reflects, but because of where he's standing, the image that I did behind him is a stone wall. And so you're actually seeing through his head in the video, but it just looks like a reflection of the stone wall on the other side.
Oh.
You mean that wasn't he's not really the king in his wife's eyes as she's about, man, I really thought it was, brother.
There was no underlying meaning. It was, oh crap, the crown is green and it's gone now. But it actually, now that I've pointed it out, Martin, when you see this, you will now see it because I've pointed it out. But
the hollow crown. Yeah.
Hollow crown, exactly. Yeah.
I can't wait.
Well, I'm curious, Michael, you were talking about how the prints didn't work. Did you and Nicole get together to say maybe this light will do this with this fabric, and those kinds of conversations going on in the background?
No, with this particular moment, we didn't really have the time afforded to us to really have those kinds of conversations, because the dialogue was being developed so late in the game, and I had to be prepped so early in the game to be ready for filming. And then going back to the not having any money, I had to use what was in stock. So this is all I have to use, and this is just what it is. So I avoided certain things that I would find, that I might use on stage. I just tried to make something else work instead, because I was able to have some conversations like that in the Bleak Midwinter. So at least we had something that we had already filmed, and I had learned a little bit already of things that I should avoid. So it would that except for the metallic and the king thing, that wasn't a gigantic issue. Like there really weren't any tiny stripes or any little check patterns or anything like that, luckily.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, as Amy, as you said, the Dallas Theater Center is a place where we do learn a lot. Like we push boundaries, we do weird things, we do shows where the audience gets pushed around in pods, we do shows where we surround the stage with 600 different chairs and have slides that people can go down. And so we've done lots of weird things and learned lots of stuff, and this show sort of was no different. The next time we do a show where we do a lot of green screen filming, because now we will, we're going to be way more prepared. We're going to know so much more.
Well,
True.
this is all brilliant. And since you speak of crazy things, this isn't really our first foray into, as you've noted, John, an experiential or immersive treatment of a show. So of the ones that we've done, did you peel any information from, let's say, Electra, or from Medea, or from Colossal, or any, how did all of that come together and evolve into something grim?
I'm going to say that the thing that I learned the most from, strangely enough, was in the bleak midwinter, our Christmas Carol, because that was the first time where we went, okay, we're not a theater, we're a something else. We're going to make something that's sort of theater, but is sort of film and is sort of a live experience in some ways because of the way it was shot, and so doing that and being able to do that sort of in the Wyly where we had the normal sort of, amount of power and technology and things. So we could do one of those under sort of better circumstances. And then we went, okay, now we're going to do that same thing, but we're going to do it walking around the campus for the audience traveling for half a mile around the campus, watching it. So yeah, for me, In the Bleak Midwinter was the thing that I learned the most from.
Michael, how about you?
Probably the same. For this particular instance, yeah. Because like I was saying earlier, I've never really done film before, ever, like literally ever. I know a lot of people kind of go back and forth between the two, theater and film, and I'm not one of those people. So in the Bleak Midwinter, yeah, that was when I had some time, I knew what was coming, and I had some time to research about what fabrics do in front of cameras and what color does on a camera and that kind of thing. And it didn't, and everything that I read didn't all pan out like I thought it would, because the certain colors will change through a camera lens, but I didn't experience that for In the Bleak Midwinter at all, actually. And maybe I just didn't have the right color that could change. But that I didn't have. Oddly enough, I didn't have that many issues for In the Bleak Midwinter. The one thing that did stand out to me, I know I'm talking about a different show, but there was one character whose costume it wasn't black, but it was dark. And there was one shot of him where he was standing in front of a black curtain and he looked like a floating head.
And it doesn't help that character had black hair, so he looked like a floating head with like no hair.
A floating face.
Right.
And so I need to avoid dark costumes if there is any potential of a dark background, so I don't get the whole floating head thing in the future. But that's where I pulled any information I had for Grimm from.
And I'm going to throw out that we're doing Dissolve next, which is our next theater experience, and we're going to keep building. Like Dissolve is using a lot of the things we learned on Grimm, and we're going to continue building from that. I know Kevin hopes, and I'll say I hope that when we start to do normal seasons again, that we still use these tools, that we still occasionally do something where, it's in a weird found space and we maybe do some more video than we normally would do, and like build on and use some of these things that we've learned over this very strange year.
That's a really good point, John Slauson. I mean, how do you all feel? Are you eager to get back into the Potter Rose and the studio and the Kalita, or are you finding freedom in?
Yes.
So, but how about when Kyle? I have a question for you in a moment. But is it going to be something that you miss, having this freedom of experimentation and being in all of these interesting spaces that we've never worked in before?
Can't it be both?
I mean, yeah, right.
I hope it will be. I hope it will be, but
I think there'll be some goods and bads and ups and downs as far as that's concerned. I'll miss some aspects of this weird, crazy season we've done for sure. But I also like when we had our LTC and everybody was listing the things that they feel joy with Dallas Theater Center. I was like, oh, this list is all the things we miss. I'm like haven't gotten to do in a while.
I super look forward to just being a prop guy again.
That too.
There's-
Can't wait to just be a master electrician again.
That is not to say I haven't enjoyed and don't enjoy designing. I 100% do.
Sure.
But I would really like to just do a show where I do the thing I've been doing for the last 30 years.
Yeah,
I
agree.
That would be super awesome.
This is actually like, I remember when like I graduated college, I said I wanted to be an ME for a regional theater, but I got the job here at Dallas Theater Center. I was like, cool, I did it. I'm an ME here. And then the season happened and I've been doing both. And I just want to write love letters to lighting designers and tell them how much I miss them and wish they would come back. I may have sent a few text messages out to some of my favorites being like, I miss you and I love you.
Yes.
Oh gosh. Well, Kyle, you're new to our family this season, so you don't have the same breadth of experiences with our spaces and our city that some of our other speakers tonight do. But what has that been like for you? Like getting to know us all through this very unusual experience.
I mean, I'm going to say that it's been easier than ever, really, to get to know the creative team that I've gotten to work with and the staff here at Dallas Theater Center, because I was kind of thrown into this like face first effectively, where I got hired as the assistant head of audio and video, which is my formal position, in November, and then I got promoted to interim head in January. So, and that was right as Something Grim was starting to take off and we were starting into the design process and filming process. So that was very much a kind of trial by fire, as it were. But in so doing, I was able to find how helpful everyone was, how nice and friendly it was to work with people. And once we actually got into working in person, that was even better, you know. Now,
it helps that you're super easy to work with.
I appreciate that. And, you know, what was actually interesting about this show is I actually got to pull from some experiences that I had back in college when I would work kind of freelance on the side with doing film audio for just like student films that were going up. So it was kind of fun to go back to that again and kind of pull from that. But, you know, I will love when we get back into doing regular shows. And I could just say, here's a board, here's some speakers. Hi, designer, go crazy.
Oh golly, I hear you, but you know, you've made it seem so effortless and seamless, and it really does feel like you've always been with us. So we're so
Excellent.
happy that you came from Atlas Theater Center.
I'm going to jump in and say, just props to Kyle. Like, this has been a crazy experience. And when he says he was thrown in, literally we had another person designing the show for sound, like what, a week before they went into rehearsals, less than that.
Yep. So, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they left the company and all of a sudden went, tag, you're it. And Kyle jumped in and did this show and did a beautiful job and kept his cool and kept everything together. And speaking as someone who was a novice video editor, doing this, like, was so easy to work with, was awesome. Like, it worked out so great, and it was an amazing experience. It could have been, it could have been real rough. If it had been me thrown into your position, it would have been real rough.
Well, is there anything that you're most looking forward to working on, or any of the spaces that you're most looking forward to working in, Kyle?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say really everything that we have coming up. I am intrigued and excited to see how it all pans out. You know, Dissolve coming up in Fair Park, seeing the venue for that. It's there's some really interesting challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunity to make something really cool. And then Working, which is going to be in the summer. Like, I love a good musical, so you know that's what I've grown up designing, and so doing Working is something that I'm very much looking forward to.
Well, without giving too much away, are each of you able, that's my dog, he's chiming in.
Hi,
Are,
puppy.
are you able to say what a standout moment for your respective areas is in the show?
Yeah, I'll go. There's a couple of things. I'll mention things. So, talking about video to start with, there is a moment in the video where we have a wishing well. That is basically, we took the camera and we laid the actress on the ground and spread hair out around her so it looked like she was floating in a wishing well, and we just held the camera over and filmed her, and then did all kinds of video effects to it, overlaid water, changed her skin tone to blue. We did all this crazy stuff to it, and I'm really proud of that moment. It looks real good. I'm really happy with the wishing well. And then I will say, when you come out of so the show starts in the parking garage. When you come out of the parking garage and walk up, and you just sort of, they're not lit yet, but you just get a glimpse of all the sort of artworks that run up the Esplanade. To me, it's like the point where you go, ooh, what's that? Like, it really pulls you in. And then 10 minutes later, less than 10 minutes later, Nicole does beautiful lighting to light them all up. And then it's like, ooh, and there's such a good payoff there for me.
I agree. The moment that you just referenced was one of the, and we talked about this earlier, Nicole, was one of the moments that I was most struck and moved by as I was in the Esplanade section of the show. So
Nice. Thank you. I'm real fond of my tunnel lighting as you walk through the tunnel.
Right.
And I'm also there's a moment in the Esplanade where my little Mac auras that are my little moving head wash lights like land perfectly. It's right after they wish for fire, and like it's good.
They do look really good. And I would say probably my standout moment for sound is all of the kind of magic. I guess like as soon as a child wishes for something, you hear this magic whoosh, kind of twinkly, sparkly thing.
We called it the sparkle. I love
the
it.
Sparkles. Yeah. one little known fact is that each one of those that you hear throughout the show is slightly different. They were each built specifically for what the child is wishing for.
Oh, that's
Only
awesome. I had no idea.
I've listened to it literally like 50 times. I noticed that, but I don't know if the other people will.
I listened to it 50 times too, and I didn't notice.
It's a subtle detail that I did, and it was like this. No one's gonna know this except for myself, but it made me happy. But I'm glad that other people noticed it.
I noticed. I mean, partly because I was timing lighting cues to do things with each of those, that I noticed like, oh, this one's slightly longer, this one's slightly higher.
Save that for Grim Trivia.
Yeah. Everyone gets a special sparkle, which is what we all deserve in life, a special sparkle.
Everyone gets a special sparkle. I don't feel like I have any super standout moments for the costumes necessarily, though the cook's costume, which is my favorite costume in the entire show, and that's totally because of the shape of the garment. But she has gigantic sleeves. They are almost as long as she is tall. And when she comes out, and the director was concerned because she's the cook, so she's handling a lot of food, she's doing a whole lot, and she was concerned about the sleeves getting in everything. But and this isn't really me. This is really more about Molly, who is the cook. She had some serious sleeveography, and she had no problems with those sleeves at all. They didn't get in anything. She really jumped in that dress and took care of it, and it looked good on her. It was kind of awesome.
I have an outstanding costume moment.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. the rich farmer's pants.
Oh,
So so we did what are affectionately referred to as standees. So they're life-size cutouts, hand painted, not printed, but hand painted life-size cutouts of several of the actors for the show. And one of them is Rich Farmer, and he is wearing crazy yellow and green stripy pants that, as a painting, are amazing. Like the way that our painter was able to sort of capture those. I love those pants. Those are great.
I like them too. And when I found it, because I'm trying to find, because spoiler, evil farmer, right? So I'm trying to figure out what the evil farmer should wear, and I found these stupid green and yellow striped pants. I mean, they're ridiculous.
They're ridiculous, and I love
But
them.
I thought these are very clown-like, but there's something evil clown about them, and I really had to sell them to the director, but I think it worked. He's so silly and evil at the same time. I feel like it kind of helped meld that together a bit. I do like those pants.
Those pants. I'll be sure to watch for the pants and the scarf and, and all the things that when I get to experience the show again. So we know that this was built from the ground up, inspired by Grimm's fairy tales. How much interaction was there in developing the play or the piece between the members of the acting company and you as a design team, or did that work happen separate in two separate groups?
It was pretty separate. We'll say that the every designer's best friend is stage management. Stage management are the people who make sure we get the information. And so while I didn't have a lot of cross-pollination with the actors as far as the script and what the show was doing, I had tons of that with stage management, who could then relate things in and help influence. And so for me, it sort of worked that way. There was sort of a middle person in that. But I did have lots of conversations before they ever went into the rehearsal room with our director. And she and I, some of the things that ended up in the show, started out as some of those early conversations, not the exact lines, not the exact dialogue, but the we're gonna make pop-up books for these things. So we have to have, there's giant pop-up books, again, spoiler, in the show. And we have the money, time, and positions to make 5. Okay, well, then we have to come up with 5 points in this story that make sense as a pop-up book. So she had that in her head in the script, to figure out, okay, what are those 5 points?
Well, and thank you for mentioning our director, Tiffany Nicole Green. I always love it when she's in the house and we get to work with her. So I'm guessing from what you just said that she already brought a good concept to the table, and then that was the guide for the development of the designs and everything that came thereafter. What was that like? Having her just come off of Hamilton and, having worked with her previously, she is one of my favorite directors to have in the house. So can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
I think it was because it was backward from the way we are accustomed to operating. Even for her, she came into this, and then it was kind of like she showed up. I'm gonna direct this show. Oh no, you're gonna write it too, by the way. So for her, it took a while for her to be able to wrap her head around it, to figure out, okay, what is the story we're going to tell? Yes, it's based off of Grimm's fairy tales, but which ones? Oh, because there are a lot of them, of course. So which stories are we going to pull from? So she, started with that list. She had 4 to 6, I don't remember exactly. What points are in those stories were important to her? How can we meld them together to create the story? And then once they were actually in the rehearsal room with the other actors is when they were siphoning the dialogue to figure in the order of the story. And that's when they had that together is when we could finally progress.
Yeah, I think there was an element of like we talked about in the working backwards idea. It was like, we didn't know exactly where we were doing this show at first. Like there were lots of different venue options. It was, when we finally decided on the Wyly, we had a concept meeting where we walked around the Wyly like, okay, do we start in the garage? What can we do in the garage? Is there, what sort of stuff can you bring to the table here? Where can we go from, there was a lot of like, okay, what can we do? And then how can we implement that into a story with the, like what's the best show we can put out with the tools that we have?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out that not long before they went into rehearsal, there was some talk about doing this at all kinds of different places, including a prison.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yep.
Well,
So-
it's no longer a prison. It's a former prison.
Former prison, yes.
Yeah. It's condemned, which is creepy. I mean, I still would have gone for that had that been the case. As we wandered around the condemned prison in the Trinity over there.
So who was scouting locations?
Sarah Beth.
That was all Sarah Beth. Got it. Sarah Beth is our artistic producer for our guests in the room. And
Yep. Yeah, she went and walked around a bunch of places and took some videos and stuff and looked at possibilities. And then we sort of realized, hey, we have this place right here, the campus of the Wyly Theatre. Why don't we just do it here? Which worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a, I don't know, weird love letter to the place we call home.
it is.
Amy, you mentioned, so we did, names are just jumping out of my head. We did a Greek play a couple years ago on campus, which is called Electra. Thank you. I couldn't come up with Electra. I don't know why. We did Electra, which also sort of was a love letter to the campus, just the other side, where we walked around. We did a sort of similar thing, very different technically, but sort of similar thing. But it made the audience sort of walk around and probably see parts of the arts district that they've never paid any attention to. I'm sure that none of our audience members have ever thought of the silver parking garage as a theater space. So
I love that. That garage is so lucky to have this show happening there. It will never, ever look as beautiful again as it does now until this group of amazing creative heads puts themselves together and makes something else happen there.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely do another show in that garage. I guarantee it.
Kevin's waiting. He's super excited.
Kevin will do something in the garage.
Well, friends, some of you have talked a little bit about our last show in the bleak midwinter. How has, I know, and this has evolved. We've done a filmed piece inside, and now we're doing this filmed piece that happens outside. But what other ways has this show been different from in the bleak midwinter, yet both of them were born of the needs of a pandemic?
I think for me, and I sort of said this earlier, but I'll sort of emphasize and reiterate, is that inside a theater, even if we're doing something weird, even if we're like we did Colossal, where we basically put the audience on the stage and put the theater in the audience, which is weird, but we're still inside of theater. And in the bleak midwinter, we filmed it like a movie shoot or like a television shoot, but we're still inside a theater. We still have all the power that we need. We still have rigging positions. We still have we still have a relatively flat floor.
We don't have to worry about rain and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and Grimm, like, I thought of this as sort of the what if show. We literally just walked around the campus and went, okay, we're in the parking garage. What if we put giant comic strips on the wall? Okay. We're out in the Esplanade. What if we built a bunch of pieces of art that stuck in the Esplanade? Okay. Like, while there was huge limitations, there were no limitations.
Right.
Which is sometimes the worst thing ever.
It can be terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the troubles with being both the designer and the head of lighting is normally a designer comes up to me with crazy ideas and my job is, well, how do I implement those? How can I do that? So I find myself like a little limited in the fact that it's like, okay, if I come up with the crazy idea, I'm the guy that's also got to like build it and implement it. So, you know, can I do that? Can I physically do that? Whereas like, you know, a designer's not going to ask me those questions. That's okay. They don't have to, you know, like so I think that's been, I don't know, something I personally struggled with is like, you know, I'm having this conversation with myself where I'm like, well, Nicole, do you think you can pull that off? I don't know, Nicole, maybe that'll work. You know,
I remember distinctly at points asking Nicole, the lighting designer, if she could check with Nicole, the head of lighting, about something technical.
Right.
I will say, Nicole, like conversely, that was something that I really loved, was being like the sound designer and the head of the department being like, well, I have this crazy idea. How do I implement it?
I think that's fair too. And I think that came up in a different way when like this, you know, snowpocalypse, whatever we're calling it, sort of hit. And like I needed to change everything like within, you know, minutes because there was no way we were even going to be able to do this show if we didn't like, if everything needed to be outside. And I was like, oh, well, I ain't got to call nobody. I'm making these decisions right now.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, John Slauson.
One of the interesting things, you know, we have a scenic crew who builds all the scenery. Some of them, Matt, our technical director, has lots of experience doing outdoor stuff, but most of his carpenters have very little experience. So there was also this like, you have to do everything differently than you're used to doing it because it's outside. And so there was this new learning curve for the carpentry shop, as well as us and sort of everybody else.
Well, you bring up a good thing to ask about, bittersweet. You know, we were prepared to open this show right in the middle of what turned out to be snowpocalypse, you know, the worst winter weather that we've had in Texas in a decade. And Nicole, you've mentioned that, you know, there were changes that had to be made as we tried to still move forward with it during Mother Nature's temper tantrum. What of those changes remain in the show now that we have glorious weather to be outside in, if any?
For me, the whole graveyard was originally lit from outside, but there's no way I had time to load in any of that and still get it up in any reasonable amount of time. So we moved that all inside. And it actually looked really cool and kind of magical that the lights appeared from nowhere. So I was like, oh, I like this. I'm keeping it.
Sort of very nuts and bolts sorts of things is Squeak, our operations manager, our head stagehand, basically. He is putting things out differently. His timing on doing things is differently. He's waiting a different amount of time to do things. There's like little tweaks he's done because we now know we need to deal with the weather. I mean, we all knew we had to deal with the weather, but then, you know, a week of people not having power and, you know, 6 degrees outside happened. So
Right.
Good grief. Good grief. Well, friends, We're getting close to the end of our hour, and I would love to open the floor to questions from our guests. So please feel free to jump in with anything that you would like to ask of our delightful design team.
Well, I have a whole bunch of questions. I mean, as a sometime director and sometime producer, I mean, my mind boggles at the ideas of that you've actually what you've achieved, but also what it may open up, you know. And so I guess my fundamental question is, do you have ideas that are to do with like having, I'm just trying to think of plays that have grand scales and things like that, like battle scenes and stuff. I mean, is there some way, I don't know much about the technology, but is there some way to have like a green screen room off stage that can be used like a studio that can then be projected onto the stage and actors in front of it, that sort of thing? Has it opened up doors in your minds for that sort of thing?
There are theaters that do that. There are and the theater lab at MIT has done things like that. It is possible. I would say a little less grand than that, but I have always loved found space theater, and this really gets my juices going for doing more found space theater.
Right. Good.
I am, I hate to say it, I'm not a huge fan of Titus Andronicus as far as Shakespeare goes. It's way down on my list, but I would love to do Titus on the campus. Like, imagine soldiers coming down the Esplanade. Imagine, like, oh my gosh, the things we could do for Titus on the Esplanade would be amazing.
Yes, and I was also thinking about when Hamlet's watching the play, that would be, they could be suddenly become a part of the audience, watching, you know. It would be.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting idea.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, sort of live audience participation by the actors or something. I don't know quite what that is.
I mean, we've done a lot of things. I mean, I worked for DTC and APAC, and I really enjoyed making the Wyly a canvas. Like, I think that's something that's really interesting, and I think we've done a interesting job of on this one, and I'd like to see more of, if we can go that direction, as far as like, you know, is there something that's a pre-show element to your shows when you walk in, or, you know.
I'm also going to jump on the, you know, we're going to be renovating the Kalita, and I super look forward to implementing video and technology and interesting sound things and interesting lighting things in this beautiful old theater that is going to be hopefully like brand new when it's done.
Can we get the architect to build us projection towers on every side of the building?
Oh, I love that. Outside. Love that idea.
That way they're nice and like contained from the weather. We don't have to worry about that end of it, but we can still do really cool stuff.
Yep.
You've also got that amazing park there
True.
that you think could, you know, spill out into.
Absolutely, yeah.
Again, my Titus idea would also be very cool in the park.
One thing that
I like Titus. That's one of my favorites. Maybe I'm a
That's
weirdo,
a good one, yeah. One thing that I did hear is your mention, Martin, of using live projections, and that's something I'm absolutely, I would love to do, and I would love to probably see some form of, like, in the future doing A Christmas Carol, but using the Pepper's Ghost effect, where you effectively have, you have the scrim and you can actually do Ghost of Christmas Past as a literal ghost.
I love me a Pepper's Ghost. It's one of my favorite things.
Right? That'd be so cool.
Well, I just wanted to throw in one line. I don't want to hog, but I do have another question, and that is: do you find that, having in a way been forced by, I guess, necessity being the mother of invention, having been forced into this situation by events, do you think that it's kind of like, in a way, there's in a very positive way, there's no going back? I mean, that it is going to become incorporated in your work. Yeah.
I think personally, absolutely. I think you know, I'm a different props person and I'm a different designer than I was a year ago, 100%. And I will say, I don't want to put words in Kevin's mouth, but Kevin has certainly indicated that he is excited by these things and wants to continue to do them, wants to continue to do these out of the box sorts of projects. So yeah, I you know, time and money and COVID and all those things are going to be limiting factors, but it also is you know, would I have designed anything like what Grimm is if those limiting factors hadn't been there? Nope. And that's exciting. That's interesting.
I mean,
you
I
need
forgot
some
to leave a trail of
drones.
breadcrumbs, so there is no going back.
Yeah, that's true. I think,
can see
as you mentioned,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, just as you mentioned, it's like a necessity, and I always say necessity breeds innovation. And so this show actually kind of felt a little bit like a technological playground where you could try new techniques and you could try new methods. And if it didn't quite work, that was okay. You just try something else, which I think is a really neat way to approach design. And I want to move forward doing that.
I just suddenly had this image of drones above a scene, even inside, shooting scenes in unusual ways.
I love drones too. We actually used drones for our gala this year. We did an online gala.
Yeah.
And one of the parts of it was our BRAC members singing on the Esplanade, and it was filmed with drones, so they could fly over and fly up to them, and it was awesome.
Oh, wow.
It was super cool.
Very cool.
Who was driving the drones?
We brought in.
Blanking on our videographer's name now.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it too. We brought in a videographer, and he was the one piloting.
I think it was Christopher Grissom.
Christopher
Grissom, yeah.
Is there such a thing as a drone driver?
No, Chris did the live stuff. There was another gentleman who did the pre-recorded stuff.
Oh.
It's with Jack. I think I know who you're talking about. I didn't meet him, but I think I know.
Yeah.
He's awesome, and I feel terrible that I'm forgetting his name, but
we love your work.
Ron
We're sorry.
Gonzalez. Thank you, Andrew Brown.
Ron Gonzalez, thank you. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, so we've already dabbled in that a little bit, and you know, I love the idea of doing an outdoor show where, you know, staying within legal limits. We have drones filming parts of it and stuff, because there's tons of legality issues with flying drones in city limits. But
right.
Use them for costume changes. Like the drone comes in with the costume and it just drops on.
I
mean,
I like
love
that.
I'm here. Let's do it.
Yeah,
do it.
you can do it. You could do a production of Cinderella like that, I think.
Right. Dress the drones up like they're little birds.
Little birds. All right, get on that. Let's
Or a page of the script for actors who can't remember their lines.
Yeah, just floating the script in front of them.
The stage management drone.
Right.
Oh.
We call line, it comes flying in.
I have done shows where, not here, I will not speak ill of anyone here, but at a previous employer, I did a show where the actor, who was often on stage by himself, could not remember his lines, but he had magazines that he was supposed to be reading. He was a security guard in the show. And I put the entire script inside the magazines.
Oh.
Wow.
That is that does not happen often. In fact, I've been doing this for more than 30 years, and it's only happened once in the time that I've been doing it, but it was quite a memory.
Well, friends, it's been a wonderful time this evening, and I'm so thankful that we got to share that space together and share all of this beautiful background information about how you make the magic happen. We got this peek behind the curtain. I thank you all for being here. And do we have any last questions before we go? Any last thoughts? Any parting words? All right, then. Something Grim on stage at Dallas Theater Center from March 18th to April 4th. Well, outside the stage at Dallas Theater Center. Are available at dallastheatercenter.org. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask after the fact, you can, there's a chat on our website that you can send them to on every page of the site, and they will find their way to us. But I think most of you know where to find me. So thank you all so much. Thank you for a beautiful work. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.